Mom, it's me, it's your son, it's Barabbas. Mom, I need to see you tonight. I need to talk to you tonight. Mom, if you're there, if you're home, please open the door. I need to tell you what has happened today. Mom, I'm free. Can you please, if you hear me, open the... Mom, hey, Mom. Hey, it's me. It's your son. No, I know. You told me to never come back here again. I know. But listen, Mom, I have to see you. I had to talk to you tonight. I had to tell you... No. I promise you. No. They let me leave. I promise you I did not break out of prison. They released me. They let me go. I have to tell you what happened. Mom, no, please. Mom, just give me 5 minutes. Just let me talk to you for 5... No, Mom, please. Don't shut the door. Don't shut me out. Please, open the door. Open the door. Don't shut me out. It's my mother. She told me to never come back here. And honestly, being the kind of son I was, I understand. Having the kind of son like me wasn't exactly easy for her. Especially raising me alone. No husband, no father. I never even knew my father. No one to look up to, no one to give a hand. And then me always getting in and out of trouble. She told me to never come home, but I had to see her tonight. I know I didn't make it easy on her. I never even knew my father, which is probably why she gave me the name Barabbas. Do you have any idea what my name means? Barabbas? It means son of a father. Son of a father. She never even knew who my father was. I never knew who my father was. And so she tried to raise me right. She'd bring me to synagogue, and I'd look at some of the religious people there. The religious leaders, the preachers and such. I had nothing in common with any of those people. And we would read the Torah, we would read the stories of Exodus, and I would read the scriptures, but I had nothing in common with those people in there either. The people of Israel, the people of God, they were slaves for 400 years in Egypt? Slaves for 400 years. And you know what the people of God did for 400 years while they were in slavery? Nothing. They did nothing. They just waited around. They just waited for God to do something. 400 years of waiting. And the same thing is happening now, today. In the year 33 AD, in Jerusalem. We've got Roman militants who are occupying our holy land, right here in Jerusalem. And they occupy our territory, and they boss us around it, and they rule with an iron fist. And you know what the average Jewish person like me does today? Nothing. They do absolutely nothing. And so even when I was just a boy, I told my mother I was not going to be one of those people who did nothing. I was going to fight back. I was going to take a stand, and I was going to try to find a way to free my people from Roman rule. I joined up with a few friends. We were like-minded. My good friends Simon and Joseph. They were like brothers to me growing up. And together we joined this group called the Zealots. We were more like freedom fighters. My mother, she used to call us a gang. You going out with your gang again tonight? Honestly, she was probably right about that. She said that group, that gang, was going to lead me down a road of destruction. And the truth is, Mom, if you can hear me, you're probably right. It started off very minor. We just wanted to get Rome's attention. And so we would do things like rob and steal and destroy some land or destroy some property. But over time, those minor acts developed into much more. And I remember the night when my whole life changed. Again, we would steal, we would rob, we would destroy, but there was one night where the whole plan fell apart. This was the plan. We were going to go into a Roman centurion's home and take all of the valuables and then leave. No one was ever supposed to know we were there. And so Simon, Joseph, and I decided to break in. And as soon as we broke in the doors, you know what we found? About a dozen Roman soldiers standing there with full armor, with shields and swords. And I don't know what you would have done in that moment, but for me, I realized it was us or them. And I wasn't going to be someone who did nothing. I was going to do something. And so we stood our ground and we decided to fight back. And immediately a huge scuffle broke loose. And I remember grabbing a candlestick off of the ground and belting a Roman soldier across the head. It wasn't our plan, but we did what we had to do in the moment. I remember seeing the Roman soldier go down to the ground. And as they jumped on top of me, lying on the ground, I looked over and I saw that he wasn't moving. He was lying in a pool of blood. They took Simon, Joseph, and myself into the prison, into the Roman dungeon, when one of the guards came in and told us that Roman centurion had died. You know what the penalty is for killing a Roman citizen, much less a Roman soldier? They don't just throw you into the dungeon. They don't just banish you. You know what they did to us? They sentenced us to death. It's a capital offense if you kill a Roman citizen. So they sentenced all three of us, Simon, myself, and Joseph, all three of us, to death. And death by the most brutal form imaginable. Death by crucifixion, by hanging on a cross. And that's actually where I'd still be tonight if it weren't for what happened today. You know, when you're sitting in prison and you're on death row, people respond in different ways. My brother Simon, he got angry. He got really angry. He got angry at us. He got angry at the world. He got angry at God. And he would curse out to God about his situation. About why has this happened to us? Whatever faith he had in God, whatever original reason we originally started freedom fighting, all of that faith was lost in the filthy Roman dungeon. My brother Joseph, he was different. Whatever faith he had in God actually grew while he was in prison. I remember seeing him kneeling down to pray, to talk to God, to sing songs to God. He would even recite Bible verses to us, if you can believe that. Here we are just waiting for the day of our death. And Joseph would get down on his knees and pray, tell us scripture. I remember at one point he got down and he took a stone and he inscribed his favorite Bible verse on the wall of the dungeon. It comes from Psalm 146, verse 7. Adonai Mithri Esherim. The Lord frees the prisoners. The Lord frees the prisoners. And he inscribed it on the wall of the dungeon. He would say, guys, look, it's the Lord who will set us free. It's the Lord who sets prisoners free. And Simon and myself, we say, Joseph, take that down. Joseph, we don't want to hear anything about that. Because we all knew there was no chance of any of us being set free. And I would still think that if it weren't for today, if it weren't for what happened to me today, man, those words have a whole new meaning for me today. And it all started with the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate. I mean, of all people, Pontius Pilate, this is where my story begins. Yeah, he had this tradition, every Passover, to release a Jewish prisoner like myself or Simon and Joseph. And it's this tradition that he came up with to try and keep the Jewish people happy. You see, in Jerusalem today, in 33 AD, there's about 15,000 people that live in the city. But when it comes time for Passover, on nights like tonight, floods of people come from the countryside, from Galilee, from Nazareth, from the south, from Tyre and Sidon. They flood into the city to worship God. So that right now there's 75,000 people in Jerusalem. And to keep all of the Jewish people in the surrounding region happy, he releases a prisoner. And so early this morning, they woke us up from our dungeon, and when we came out, and it was myself and Simon and Joseph, but then there was a fourth man. You know, I found out that they had taken in this fourth man just late last night. Not quite sure exactly what happened. I mean, I had heard of this man, maybe you have too. His name was Jesus of Nazareth. And this man, Jesus, we ran in different circles. We ran in different crowds. I've never met him, never had a conversation. I've got a friend who's actually one of his followers, but I've heard some stories about him. He had done miraculous things, like take people who were blind since birth and give them sight. Now, he had taken people who couldn't walk and given them the ability to stand up and walk away. This Jesus of Nazareth, some people called him a prophet. I had even heard others say that he might be the Son of God. And so what was he doing up here with us? What could possibly be the reason for Jesus to be up here with me and my brothers? And yet there we all stood with Pilate before thousands of people. When Pilate said, "Which of these prisoners do you want me to release?" And we all knew what he was going to say. We all knew what the crowd was going to say. Everyone was going to say Jesus. This Messiah figure, this Son of God, this miracle man, this prophet. I mean, who would ever say Simon or Joseph or Barabbas? That's why Pilate asked the question after all. He knew everyone would release him. When Pilate asked the question, we all just looked down. We knew what the answer would be. But when the crowd yelled out, they didn't call upon the name of Jesus. They didn't shout the name of Jesus. You know what name they cried out? Barabbas! Barabbas! Give us Barabbas! Free Barabbas! And I heard the crowd screaming my name, and I have never loved my name before, but in that moment, I was so overwhelmed to hear them calling my name. Barabbas! Give us Barabbas! I could hardly believe what was happening. I looked over at Simon, I looked over at Joseph, I looked over at Jesus, I looked over at Pilate. We were all shocked at what was happening. Moments later, they brought me back to my cell, and a Roman guard came in, and he said, "Which of you is Barabbas?" I looked over at Simon, knowing I had not deserved to be released any more than him. If anything, I was way more guilty than him. And I looked at him as if to extend him an arm. He just turned away. He's angry. I looked over at Joseph, knowing that if there was any one of us in prison who deserved to be released, it was him. It was not me. And I went over, and he came over towards me, my brother Joseph, and he gave me a hug. And he gave me a kiss, and he said, "See, Barabbas? It's the Lord who sets prisoners free." Maybe, just maybe that's true. As I was released, I don't know what you would have done, but I couldn't just leave. I couldn't just go on with my day. And these were my brothers. We had run around together for years. We had caused all kinds of mayhem together. I could not just leave them as they went to their death. And so I decided I would follow them. And that's exactly what I did. I went out and I followed Simon, and I followed Joseph. And I also followed this other man, Jesus. Who was this man? Who was this man who took my place? Who was this man who would be killed instead of me? I remember immediately Pilate brought them down to his own courtyard where they had them stripped naked and flogged and beaten. And Simon, I told you, he was angry. He was yelling and cursing. And Joseph was cursing too, I have to tell you. He was cursing at the guards and standing out there watching them. If you were there, you would have been just like you would have been cursing at the guards. The terrible things they were doing to them, even if they deserved it, to dehumanize someone like that, it was despicable. And so I was spitting, and I was cursing, and I was yelling at the guards. But I remember when they were flogging Jesus, he did something I had never seen before. He didn't even open his mouth. His mouth was shut the entire time. He was like a lamb, just going to the slaughter. It wasn't like they were forcing him there. It almost looked like this was part of his plan all along, like he was going there willingly. And I remember feeling the same way as I watched them climb a half a mile up the mountain to Golgotha, to the mountain just outside Pilate's courtyard. And all three of them were carrying their crosses. And when they got to the top of the hill, there were people mocking all three of them. Simon and Joseph retaliated. But Jesus, he said nothing. He said nothing. Now, I remember when they laid down the cross. It took 2 or 3 guards to hold down Simon and to pin him to the cross, as a third one took a hammer and nail and drove it into each of his hands and into his feet. Simon kicking and screaming and fighting the whole time. The same thing happened with Joseph. They took the cross and they laid it down. It took 2 guards to pin him down to the cross while he was kicking and screaming, while a third took the hammer and nails and drove it into each of his hands and into his feet. He was fighting, he was kicking and screaming the whole time. But this third man, Jesus had done something no one had ever seen. When they laid down the cross, before the guards could even take him, Jesus laid himself down on the cross. And he stretched out each of his arms with no one holding them down, inviting the nails into his body. Here was the man who was going to this cross by his own free will. Watching Jesus laid out on that cross, stretching himself out with his arms wide, looking on the soldiers in the crowd with love and compassion. I became crushed. The weight of everything that had happened hit me in that moment. I went to the cross to follow Simon and Joseph, but this man, Jesus, was mesmerizing me. I couldn't take my eyes off of him. And as I looked at him laying out on that cross, I realized that should be me laying there. That was my cross to bear. That cross 24 hours ago was reserved for me, and for my punishment, and for what I have done wrong. And I'm not going to lie to you, I've been a bad guy. I've done a lot of terrible things in my life. I've committed crimes. I've committed murder. It would not be unjust for me to be on that cross. But to see this man, you knew he wasn't like one of us. You knew he was a good man. You knew there was something different about him. To see him on my cross, it crushed me. And I realized that he was on that cross instead of me. I remember when they lifted up all 3 crosses on the hill. Looking out at all 3 crosses. I was there for Simon and Joseph, but I couldn't take my eyes off of Jesus. I remember looking at Jesus, look down to some of the people standing beneath him. There weren't many, just a few women, a couple disciples. But he was looking down from his cross with compassion, with concern. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but it sounded like he was comforting them. I mean, could you imagine being at your death, in agony, in despair, more worried about those who are around you? At one point, I saw Jesus start talking to Simon and Joseph. And so I got really close so I could hear. And I listened in. And I heard Simon cursing at Jesus, which didn't surprise me. Simon was angry, right? He was always yelling. He was angry at the world. He was angry at God. He was angry at this man whom he just met. And he was cursing at him when Joseph spoke up and he said, Simon, don't you fear God? Have you no fear of God? This man is not like one of us. To tell you the truth, that's how I felt also. And then Jesus looked over to Joseph with love and tenderness in his eyes. And he said to him with confidence, "Son, today you will be with me in paradise." And it looked like he meant it. And I looked up at Joseph, and as he looked back at Jesus, I had seen that look in his eyes. He believed him. I started to believe him too, I guess. You know, if I were Jesus on that cross, surrounded by people yelling and cursing and mocking him time and time again, the crowd, the soldiers, everyone else around, just totally mocking him, I would have said something back. You know, I definitely would have spoken up. I would have had some choice words that I can't share with you tonight to everyone else around. And he said nothing. Until finally I looked up at him, and it looked as if he was trying to get the energy and the air in his lungs to say something. And so I listened closely as Jesus, he didn't look down at the crowd as I expected. Instead, he looked up at the sky. And with his arms stretched out on the cross, he looked up at the sky and he said, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing." Father, forgive them. You know, as someone who never knew my own father, to hear this man look up to the sky, look up to God, and call him Father, that astounded me. I mean, who was this man that he could call God his Father? He wasn't just the son of a father. This might have been the son of the Father. This might have actually been the Son of God. At least that's how he was portraying himself on the cross. Father, forgive them. Forgive them. Now, I know he was probably talking about the soldiers. He was probably talking about the Pharisees and the scribes. He was probably talking about the crowd. But when Jesus yelled out, "Father, forgive them," all I heard was, "Father, forgive him. Father, forgive Barabbas. Father, forgive that man, because he does not know what he's doing." And in that moment, just I don't know, 10 hours ago today, I hadn't prayed in years. I hadn't prayed in a long time, but seeing Jesus look up to the sky and say, "Father," I decided I would do the same thing. I overcome with emotion, I looked to the sky and I said, "Father, forgive me. Father, forgive me, for I don't know what I'm doing. Father, if there is forgiveness for someone like me, Father, if there is hope for someone like me, God, if there's a chance for a new start for someone like Barabbas, then Father, if by some miracle everything that happened today was a part of your plan, and this man Jesus somehow has the ability to give me and anyone else forgiveness, then Father, I beg you, forgive me." And I have to tell you, it was in that moment that I felt as if the heavens had opened up and my heart had opened wide and God himself had come on in. I knew he had heard my prayer. I knew God had forgiven me. And in that moment, I knew that God was the one who had set me free. Father, forgive me. And he did. In the same way my jail cell was open earlier this morning, the hold and the grip and the chains of sin and death and destruction that marked all of my life, those same chains came loose when I called out for God to forgive me. Friends, if you're here tonight, it's possible that you need to cry out to God in the same way I have. It's very possible that in your seats right now, you're not much unlike me sitting in that Roman dungeon. It's very possible that in your seats, and maybe you think, no, I'm not that bad. I'm not a Barabbas. I'm not a criminal. I'm not a thief. I'm not a murderer. I'm not a prisoner. I'm not that bad. That's not me. I'm innocent. Are you sure about that? Are you sure you're innocent? Are you sure you and I are so different? See, my name is Barabbas, but I believe your name is Barabbas as well. And the same way I needed to be set free, you need to be set free. If you looked at your life and your sin and your mistakes and all the wrong you've ever done and compared it to the law of God, you fall short. And the sentence for you and for me was the same. Sentenced to death. Right? And not just any death, but eternal death. Because of our sins against God. But friends, I can tell you with confidence, because God has found a way to set me free, that you can be set free as well. And that you don't have to leave here tonight a prisoner. You don't have to leave here tonight in chains. That you can cry out to God because of Jesus, because of what He has done on the cross, because of what He has done. You can cry out to God, Father, forgive me, for I don't know what I'm doing. I want to tell you, God hears that prayer. And it is the Lord who sets prisoners free. It is the Lord who sets people like me and people like you free. That's actually what I came here to tell my mom tonight. To tell her that I'm no longer Barabbas, the son of a father, but Barabbas, the son of the Father. And I've got a new start. I've got a fresh beginning. I've got a new hope. God has given me a second chance in life, not only from prison, but from the sin and the brokenness that has entangled me my whole life. Friends, I opened the door to let God in. And I hope you'll open the door to let Him in as well. Now, my mother's not opening the door. My own mother. And that's okay, Mom. You can stay in there today. That's fine. Don't open the door. I'm going to tell you something, Mom. I'm going to be back here tomorrow. And I'm going to be back every day that follows. And I'm going to knock on this door relentlessly until you open it up and let me in. I will be back. I'm standing right here at the door. And I will continue to knock until you open the door and let me in.